Hello, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters in Christ. I hope and pray y'all are doing well. I just wanted to make a quick video here in between feature-length presentations of Armenian Orthodox Nation to deliver kind of a quick but necessary message. One thing that I think is important for this channel, for this brand moving forward, is transparency and making things really clear just in terms of what I'm putting out, and specifically when discussing the matters that we'll be discussing on this channel, whether it's the church in a contemporary context or whether it's, some sort of theological or historical discussion. In all of my years of being an internet church nerd, it's become very clear that sometimes some folks really need to be told things multiple times in a row in no uncertain terms over and over again before they finally understand it. And I'm really not trying to belittle folks here. Lord knows I am not an expert. I am, of course, not a member of clergy, and I am on my journey as a student of the Orthodox faith like anyone else is. But there is absolutely much to be said about the current state of Christianity online, especially what I will call the TikTokification of traditional Christianity, and specifically, the denominations that are often included under that umbrella. Of course, I am not the only person who has complaints and observations about that. I could certainly make a whole separate video, a very long rant about that, and the, of course, excellent potential for evangelization through short form vertical aspect ratios, such as Instagram Reels and TikToks and YouTube Shorts and all that, and Twitter clips. And yet we can also acknowledge the great disservice to our faith the clip farming phenomenon does. The Orthodox faith specifically cannot be condensed to multiple 30-second videos. Christianity is, of course, a lived experience, as anyone should know, and it really doesn't matter how many videos, how many clips you watch. It is something you need to experience and live out. And I think most people know that, but maybe every once in a while some folks will need a reminder of that. That is not what the specific topic of this video is, but I'm bringing that up to, add on to what I said at the very beginning of this video, which is some folks really need things to be made very clear to them, and I plan on making certain things very clear on this channel, so no one can accuse me of being vague and mysterious with what my personal opinions and standards are, and also especially what the standards and beliefs of our church are. I think being vague and avoiding certain topics, avoiding certain questions actually does us a disservice, and it is not something that we should do at all, especially when encountering and engaging in this new frontier for evangelism that is the internet and social media specifically, and this still pretty new social media frontier and platform for evangelism. So the notes I have today are just really brief, and they are concerned with terminology that I personally will be using on this channel. I'll just be clarifying what certain terms mean when I will be using them personally, and also when they are used by church authorities in certain texts. And I might also bring up, a couple terms that I personally will not be using, and I will be explaining why I disagree with them. And I will also be bringing up one specific phenomenon that I am really not a fan of, that I think is really quite dangerous, actually, and it's actually a big reason why I started this channel in the first place. So the first item centers around how I will be referencing the church, how I will be alluding to the church, with a capital T and a capital H, the church, on this channel. When we use terms such as Orthodox, fuller phrases such as the one holy Catholic, Apostolic, and Orthodox Church, let it be known that when such terminology is used on this channel, it will be used to refer to Oriental Orthodoxy specifically. Okay? I would think that this should be obvious to my audience, and yet, such terminology does confuse people because a lot of churches actually apply similar terminology to themselves, and that's obvious as well. But let it be known that when Orthodox, the one true church, etc., is used on this channel, it is being applied to the communion of churches known to the West as Oriental Orthodoxy, okay? We even saw an example of this, a relatively contemporary example of this being used in the patriarchal encyclical issued in 1898 by His Holiness Mugardich I, which was his address to the Armenians of the United States of America, and Der Mesrop and I went over that encyclical in our most recent video, the most recent video prior to this one, and it is an excellent video. If you haven't watched it, you absolutely should. But that letter is actually a great example of how an authority from our church, and a particularly notable and famous and beloved one, used the terms Orthodox and Catholic in a self-referential manner when discussing the Armenian church. And it is very important to make note of that distinction because, as I just said, there are so many other denominations of Christianity out there that claim to be Orthodox, Catholic, the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, etc. And so when we use such terms, whether it's in our liturgy, when we recite the Nicene Creed, or whether we are going through letters, books, etc. from our patriarchs, our saints of centuries ago, and they use such terminology, it must be established that they are referring to us. They are referring to our church. They are referring to the communion of churches that is Oriental Orthodoxy. And I will now use that to pivot to an example of a term that is somewhat popular still in academia when discussing historical Christian churches. I feel like it was more popular a few decades ago. I don't see it used that often anymore, but I do see it still used every now and then, and I personally really object to it, and I will explain why now. But that phrase is the two Orthodox families. Okay, some of you already know where I'm going with this. I personally really object to this term, and I will not be using it on this channel. In fact, this is not even my first time going on the public record saying that I really dislike this term or this title, the two Orthodox families. And the simple reason why I don't like this term, and there are a few other similar phrases, but the reason why I don't like this term specifically is because it is inherently confusing, right? Think about it, okay? The two Orthodox families. Now, for those of you who don't know, this term, this phrase, is often utilized in scholarship whenever one wants to refer to two communions of churches that both use the title of Orthodox. One communion being Oriental Orthodoxy, the other communion being Eastern Orthodoxy. Now, let it be said, these are two different communions of churches, okay? Two different denominations of Christianity. And yet, in recent decades, scholars have decided to use phrases such as the two Orthodox families when discussing these two communions of churches in conjunction with one another, basically. That is inherently confusing, and thus, I personally will not use such terminology on this channel. You might ask why. And think about it this way, right? If someone who is a novice on, theological and historical matters relating to Christianity and the variety of ancient churches, right? When they see that phrase, the two Orthodox families, they might come away with, and I've seen people, I've encountered people come away with the impression of, oh, well, that means there's one Orthodox church, but there's two different groups within the Orthodox church. There's two families. So there is one family, and then there's one family, and then that's the Orthodox church because it's the two Orthodox families. No, that's not how it is. And if this is your first time hearing it, then I apologize and I'm sorry for bursting your bubble, but that is not the way it works. And that is not the way it has worked for quite a long time, well over 1,000 years. Oriental Orthodoxy and Eastern Orthodoxy are two different communions of churches with some differing theological beliefs. And those differing theological beliefs have caused quite a bit of conflict over the course of their respective histories. And because of that, each communion, Oriental Orthodox on one side, Eastern Orthodox on the other, refer to themselves as the Orthodox Church, but don't recognize the other communion as being fully Orthodox. Two different churches both use the title of Orthodox, but neither recognizes the orthodoxy of the other one, okay? This is not merely a matter of opinion. It's not, oh, Grant, that's just your opinion. That's just your interpretation. That's just your bias speaking. No, that is basic theological and historical fact. It's reality. And yet it is so peculiar that very often when one states this basic and obvious theological and historical reality, this fact, there are many people on both sides. Make no mistake, this happens on both sides. People on both sides will sometimes react as if you are slowly extracting their teeth with no anesthesia. It is honestly quite bizarre how negatively some folks react to individuals, whether they are laymen such as me or even church authorities, when they state this basic theological and historical fact, when they speak in terms of reality, in terms of not just historically what has happened and what has been the case, but what is also the case now. Because of that, I will not be using such terminology, and I will be making it very clear that when I say orthodoxy, as an example of one phrase, one important phrase, I'm not referring to the other guys who call themselves Orthodox. I'm referring to my church. I'm referring to the communion that I belong to. If you find that upsetting, I guess just do more research and consult the church fathers. And I hate to sound like, again, I'm antagonizing anybody or I'm looking down on anybody, but it's just very clear that at this point, we have a lot of very confused individuals in the church. And this has unfortunately led to not good developments, to say the least, to be blunt about it. And that leads me into another point of something that is not, a formally approved practice, but it is something that I definitely see laymen engaging with quite often online. And that is a phenomenon that I will refer to as outsourcing. So in the context of orthodoxy, Oriental Orthodoxy, what is outsourcing? Let me bring up a hypothetical example for you. It's a hypothetical that I know a lot of you and I know a lot of the viewers of this channel have experienced. Let's say you are scrolling through Instagram as you do, and you encounter a new page that you don't follow yet. And you say, oh, this page looks really, really cool. And you read the bio, you see the profile picture, you see the first few posts, and this is a person who claims to be from your church. And you say, oh, great, this is a brother from whichever Orthodox rite it might be. And you say, okay, great, this person is going to post Bible verses. They're going to post commentaries by the church fathers. This is great. This is another new page that is, evangelistic in nature. It's, going to be promoting the wisdom of our fathers and, of course, Bible lessons within all that as well. But then you scroll down the page and you begin to notice there are some, to use a term that is actually used by the church, by authors from the church sometimes, foreign figures featured on this page. If you know what I mean. Foreign figures, okay? And so you scroll through this page and you realize, okay, this page is run by a person who is supposedly from my church, and yet they are regularly posting foreign figures. Now, for those of you who don't know what I mean by foreign, by that I mean the heterodox, people who are not from our church. Because if you didn't know, if you didn't kind of catch on to that, when I discussed the differences between Oriental Orthodoxy and Eastern Orthodoxy and how each church recognizes itself as being the Orthodox Church, doesn't recognize the other communion as being the Orthodox Church, and how there are indeed very real theological differences between the two. The differences also include having some different saints. Okay? And that might be upsetting for some people to hear, but again, it is historical fact. We Oriental Orthodox venerate certain figures that they don't, and they, the other guys, venerate certain figures that we don't venerate. Are there some saints, like the early church fathers, the group of church fathers that are referred to as the early church fathers, that we share in common with them and the rest of Christendom in general? Yes, absolutely. But after schisms happen and each body of churches goes their separate way, the shared venerations, for the most part, stop. This is another thing that is basic fact, and yet unfortunately, peculiarly, a lot of folks really get upset about when you point it out to them. I don't know why that is, but folks often get very upset by it. It's strange. And this can sometimes lead to this outsourcing phenomenon that I've discussed, where certain individuals who claim to be from our church seem to believe that these heterodox figures who are, maybe they are venerated in other churches, maybe they are just, theologians, contemporary theologians from other churches, they seem to believe that those figures are authoritative for us too. When, sorry if you have to hear it from me first, that's not the case. I am sure that if you are someone who has spent a decent amount of time online in Christian circles, you have seen such, social media profiles and you've been confused by them. Thankfully, and glory to God for this, it seems that the tide is slowly beginning to turn against this. There are a few examples of pretty large social media pages that have engaged in such outsourcing. And I would say over the course of the past couple years, I have begun to see more and more and more comments from ordinary individuals who are laymen within the church, commenting on such posts, saying things such as, "Why are you posting this person? They're not from our church. Why are you posting this person? They're not a saint in our church. Why aren't you posting more saints from our church?" Make no mistake about it, this is a good thing. It is good that our people want to know about our saints. They want to know about our church authorities. They want to know about our beliefs. They want to know about our theological doctrines, our dogmas, our history. That's a good thing. And that is a big reason why I started Armenian Orthodox Nation, because I noticed there was a bit of a void in terms of there just not being that many social media pages that post quotes, share teachings, etc. from our authorities, from the Armenian expression of Orthodoxy, that post a lot of Armenian church fathers specifically. And my thought was, okay, I'll do my best to help with this, to help fill this void, basically, because our people deserve to know who our saints are, what our traditions are, etc., right? A basic need for the church in the social media landscape. And so I will make it very clear right now, this page, this brand, Armenian Orthodox Nation, will not engage in outsourcing, because we as the Orthodox Church don't need to outsource. Let me ask a question to the audience. Is our faith lacking? Does our church lack something? Because let's be clear about something very important here. Our church, our faith, lacks nothing. We hold the true, genuine expression of the Orthodox faith, taught by Christ, handed down to the apostles, handed down to their successors, and kept by the church fathers throughout millennia. There is nothing any other communion of churches, any other denomination of Christianity has that we don't. Let's be very clear about that. I don't think a lot of people are willing to say that out loud. I am. There is nothing we don't have that some other church does have. We are the one holy Catholic, Apostolic, and Orthodox Church. And we say such every single Sunday during our divine liturgy. Now, if you're someone who attends church, you attend liturgy every single week, when you say those words, when you say those phrases, do you mean it? Or are you going through the motions? We need to start having these conversations, brothers and sisters. When you say those words, do you mean it? Do you think the church means it when we say those words? Or do you think the church is just going through the motions? It's time that we get serious. This page will not engage in outsourcing because the wisdom of our church fathers is sufficient. We don't need to bring in theologians from some other denomination to teach us about what we believe. We don't need some other guy from one of their seminaries to lecture us about what our church did or said throughout history. Do we not trust our own spiritual authorities? Do we not trust our own clergy? Do we not trust our own saints? Right? Do you guys see what I'm getting at here? We don't need to outsource, and thus, I will not outsource. Maybe every once in a while, in a very rare occasion, I will preface something by saying, put an asterisk on something, and I'll say, hey, just letting you guys know, this person who I am referring to, not from our church. But aside from those very limited exceptions that may come up in the lifespan of this channel, however long it may be, and may it be many years, God willing, we will not outsource on this channel. And that is a core reason why I started Armenian Orthodox Nation. Because I would argue, and I've spoken to many individuals, both in person and online, who are fellow parishioners, fellow laymen, acolytes, deacons, etc., people who are just generally interested in our church and interested in evangelization, I can say nobody likes outsourcing. We don't need it. We want to know about our teachings, our beliefs, our doctrines, our saints. Enough with the outsourcing. Armenian Orthodox Nation will not be participating, and God willing, this is a conversation that will soon extend throughout the church, because wherever outsourcing is happening, and especially if it is occurring to the detriment of our teachings, if that outsourcing is, God forbid, beginning to cancel out, to overtake our teachings, then that's something that should be stopped and prevented. Our faith is sufficient. Our faith is enough. And for one last note, I will be making an appeal to the Holy See of Alexandria, our Coptic Orthodox brothers and sisters in the faith. I am bringing them up specifically as a member of the Armenian delegation to make another linguistic point. Let it be clear. It's Copts, not Coptics. Copts is how you refer to the Coptic people in plural form, okay? Copts, not Coptics. I don't know what has gone on, but so many people online are saying Coptics. It's like, it's actually crazy. And, the funny thing is, you can mute certain words on Twitter, and I'm sure other social media profiles too. But if you go on Twitter and you mute the term Coptics so that it no longer appears on your timeline, the amount of disingenuous midwits on your timeline will decrease by probably 95%. So hey, that's a pro tip for y'all if you're on Twitter. And actually, one more thing pertaining to the word Oriental in Oriental Orthodoxy, okay? Let it be clear that the term Oriental Orthodoxy as well as the term Eastern Orthodoxy are Western terms that have been applied to the two different ancient communions of churches that refer to themselves as the Orthodox Church. And it's kind of funny because Eastern and Oriental can even be interchanged for one another when speaking geographically, because both kind of refer to generally the same area of the world, which again actually leads to quite a lot of confusion when discussing historical and theological matters, right? But when it comes to how the term Oriental is used specifically, I've seen, for whatever reason, lots of folks referring to our church our theological teachings as Orientalism and the Oriental teaching, and they just use Oriental as like the catch-all term for what we believe in our church throughout history. Orientalism is actually a very specific historiographical term that applies to like the study of the Far East, like East Asia, throughout history. So when you say Orientalism and you're thinking it refers to our church, the Oriental Orthodox Church, it doesn't, and you look stupid for using it in such a context. Orientalism is not how our church has ever been referred to throughout history. We have never used it personally, and I don't think anyone in Christian academia in general from any tradition has used that to describe us throughout history. So let that also be made clear as well. Okay, we aren't Orientalism. We refer to ourselves historically as the One Holy Catholic Apostolic and Orthodox Church. Okay, I personally use the title Oriental Orthodox, and in a contemporary setting, a lot of church leaders, a lot of scholars use the phrases Oriental Orthodox or Eastern Orthodox because it is convenient and it's kind of just the standard in Western academia to refer to these two different communions of churches from the, historical, intellectual East, geographical East, that both refer to themselves as the Orthodox Church under these two terms. It's just a more convenient Western construction in, Western terminology, Western academia. I know it can be confusing, but God willing, this video helped clear it up somewhat, and also, I wanted to clear some things up regarding where this channel stands about certain terms, about certain developments, and so I hope I made it more clear for y'all, and just in general moving forward, you guys know a bit more about where this brand stands and where I stand personally on certain topics. Some of the things I touched on in this video I will be elaborating more on later, but for right now, I feel like this relatively short message is all that was needed to clarify certain things. And so with that, I pray this video finds you well. God bless y'all, and thank you so much for watching.